going to go through the things that we'll be doing during maths this next half term. We're going to be continuing with our fractions topic, which means we'll move on from our finding quarters and halves and thirds to unit and non-unit fractions as one of the things that we'll cover. As you can see here, a unit fraction always has a 1 in the numerator's position, and a non-unit fraction will always have a number that is larger than 1 in the numerator position. So if you wanted to look at some of those types of fractions with your children, that would be super. We'll also be looking at tenths as decimals, so I've written tenths as decimals here, and as you can see I've started the pattern of 0.1 is a tenth, 0.2 is 2 tenths, so if you and your children wanted to look and see if you could write the rest of the tenths within that and make the pattern, that would be fabulous. We'll also be looking at fractions of a set of an amount of objects. So here I've said, what would half of 8 be? And you can see here that the denominator in the fraction of a half shows you how many parts you are going to split the amount into, which is 8. So I've made a bar model here, and I've got 2 parts to that bar model, and then I've shared the 8 things between there, and it shows me that 1/2 gives us 4, and that's how I'm able to work it out. So I don't know whether your children want to have a go at that with your help. We'll also look at equivalent fractions this half term. The children have had a little go at equivalent fractions with a fractions wall, so they'll probably remember that if you wanted to talk to them about it. But I've just shown you a little example here, that if we were to look at equivalent fractions of a half, 2 quarters is an equivalent to a half, and what I've done to the 1 to make it 2 is times it by 2. So I've had to do the same to that denominator at the bottom. I've times the 2 by 2 to make it 4. And if I was to continue that pattern of times in the top by 2, I'd also have to times the bottom by 2, and that would give me another equivalent fraction. So I don't know whether you want to have a look at equivalent fractions with your children, but if you do, then that's just a little bit of a tip of how you find your equivalents. And we'll also be looking at comparing fractions as well. And the children are very used to these symbols here of smaller than, greater than, and equal to. So they might want to perhaps have a go at seeing if they can write some sentences that compare fractions. We'll also look at time for the last couple of weeks of this half term. So we'll be looking at months and years, we'll be looking at hours in a day, and we'll also be looking at AM and PM clock. Obviously that will include then the 24-hour clock and possibly looking slightly at digital times. So if you wanted to sort of show your children any digital devices, then that would be great to help them understand when they come to do it at school. And then the duration of time, so probably timetables, we'll be looking at timetables. So if you've got the opportunity to find some timetables that include time, duration and things like that, then that would be super. That would be a really good help for the children for helping with their topic this half term. Thank you then, I hope that's helped. Hi there, so for English in Summer 1, we're going to be looking at different texts, and that will lead us into certain types of writing. We're going to be looking at poetry again this half term, and in particular we're going to be looking at acrostic poetry. That means that a word is written in very bold capital letters in a vertical way across the page, and then we think of things that are about the subject of this particular one of snow that will then create sentences starting with each of the letters of that word. So here I've given you an example, and it says soft snow stinging my senses. Now there's lots of S's to that word, so that is using the feature of alliteration within poetry, and we will look at doing that. So whether the children want to have a go at just, perhaps using their own name and coming up with words to describe themselves, but trying to get alliteration amongst it, that would be super if you could do just something like that. We could also use similes within our poetry, so I've got another one here that says newly fallen flakes as soft as a pillow of feathers. As soft as is your simile. It's comparing one thing to something else. So they might also want to have a go at trying to think about some sentences that are similes. And then there's also just a good use of adjectives, so really good strong vocabulary within our poetry. Silver white, crispy snow, crunching underfoot. Okay, the use of some adjectives there, we'll also have a look at that as well. We might use different poetry forms as well, but if you could just look at this type with them, then that would be really helpful. Another thing that we'll be doing during this half term is looking at stories and the different parts of a story. So we'll be looking at a story mounting, okay, and in particular the resolution of a story. So the start of the story, you sort of get the middle of the story where there's a bit of a problem, and then how does that story end? The resolution. So if the children wanted to have a look at a story with you and try and pinpoint where the resolution to that story was, that gives them some idea, and you can help them to just sort of find that resolution. That would be really helpful for them when they come to do their own. And then we'll also be looking at formal letters. So we've written letters before, but they were quite informal. This time it'll be a formal letter. So we'll be looking at the features of of the letter, and in particular formal language. So I've given you some examples here. Inform, if you was to use the word inform, or for example, within a letter, that would be classed as formal language. So we'd also be looking at some sentence openers, especially again for this formal letter. We'll be looking at protesting within our letters, so there'll be specific language that we might want to use if writing a protest letter. I wish to express my concerns. Furthermore would be typical sentence openers for our particular genre of letter that we'll be writing. So if you could look at a different variety of letters and see if they can pinpoint these types of things, formal language in the starting of the sentences, that will be helping them then when it comes to doing this during this half term. Okay, thanks again. I hope that helps. Hi there. So for our topic this half term, we're going to be focusing on a topic called predator. That includes a lot of science, and it also includes a little bit of geography. So the geography side of things that we'll be looking at is to look at a map and to look at the grid referencing in a map. So I just wanted to talk you through some of the vocabulary that you might want to speak to with your children if you get the opportunity to perhaps look at a map together. So it's very similar to maths, as it says here. All the grid lines are numbered, and sometimes they're lettered as well, but in this case we've got numbers. And if you look at this map here in particular, you can see that there are 2 numbers to each of the lines, okay? And so when we read this particular type of map, it would be called a 4-grid referenced map. The eastings on the map are the ones that run across from left to right, and the northings are the numbers that run from bottom to top. And the way that you would read a map then would be across the eastings first, and then up the northings afterwards. And there's a really good saying, which I'm going to just flick the video on, if it will work. It doesn't want to work. Oh, it is, it's there. Here we go, that one. So you use the 2 digits along the easting and the 2 digits along the northing in order to read a point that you might want to look at on a map. So in this case, we want to look at this pink square here, and we always look to the very bottom left corner. So that would give us a grid reference, a 4-grid reference of 3, 2, and then this one here, 4, 3, okay? So remember, one way to remember is when you're reading the grid reference is to say along the corridor and then up the stairs, and that will give you then the way that you need to read. Along first and then up next. So if you want to have a look at those with your children, then that would be super, then that would help them when we come to do this work at school. And then part of our topic also is to look at different predators. So we'll be looking at predatory birds, we'll be looking at predatory aquatic predators, we'll be looking at predatory plants, and then we'll be looking at predatory animals and insects. So if the children would like to investigate and research the different types of predators that they might find within those 4 categories and bring us some information to the lessons, that's going to be really helpful to the types of things that they'll be learning during this half term. Thanks very much again for watching, and I hope that helps.